Royal Guard breached Camilla's secret chamber. What he revealed was far too much. The autumn rain hammered against the ancient windows of Clarence House as Detective Sergeant Marcus Wellington adjusted his collar nervously. 23 years of service with the Metropolitan Police, followed by 8 years as a Royal Protection Officer, had prepared him for many things. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The call had come at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October. A security breach at one of the royal residences. What should have been a routine investigation into a possible break-in had quickly spiraled into something far more complicated and dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Marcus stood in the marble-floored hallway of Clarence House, the official residence of King Charles III and Queen Consort Camilla. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed 4 times, its deep tone echoing through the eerily quiet corridors. The other staff members had been temporarily relocated to the East Wing while the investigation took place. "Sir, we've completed the initial sweep," reported Officer Jennifer Hayes, a young but sharp member of the Royal Protection Team. Her voice carried a strange tension that Marcus hadn't heard before in their 3 years of working together. "The breach occurred on the second floor in what appears to be a private study." Marcus nodded, following Hayes up the grand staircase. The Persian carpets muffled their footsteps as they passed portraits of long-dead royals whose painted eyes seemed to watch their every movement. The house felt different tonight, charged with an energy that made the hair on Marcus's arms stand on end. "Any signs of forced entry?" Marcus asked, his detective instincts taking over despite the unusual circumstances of investigating a crime scene within royal walls. Hayes shook her head, her blonde ponytail swaying. "That's the strange part, sir. No broken windows, no picked locks, no damaged doors. Security cameras show no unauthorized personnel entering the building. Yet someone was definitely here." They reached the second-floor landing, where the carpet changed from deep burgundy to a softer cream color. Hayes led him down a corridor, lined with family photographs and watercolor paintings. At the end of the hall stood a heavy oak door, slightly ajar. "The Queen Consort's private study," Hayes explained, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "She uses this room for her personal correspondence and reading. According to the staff, it's rarely accessed by anyone except Her Majesty herself and her personal secretary, Mrs. Thompson." Marcus approached the door carefully, noting the absence of any obvious damage. The brass handle was polished and intact. He pushed the door open slowly, and it swung smoothly on well-oiled hinges. The room beyond was elegant but lived in. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with everything from classic literature to modern biographies. A mahogany desk sat near the tall windows, its surface neat except for a small stack of letters and a fountain pen laid precisely parallel to the edge. "What exactly was disturbed?" Marcus asked, scanning the room with trained eyes. Hayes pointed toward the far wall, where one of the bookcases stood at an odd angle. "The cleaning staff noticed this yesterday morning. The bookcase appears to have been moved, though no one remembers authorizing any furniture rearrangement." Marcus walked over to examine the bookcase more closely. It was a heavy piece, definitely requiring at least 2 people to move safely. Yet, as he looked behind it, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Hayes, come look at this." Behind the displaced bookcase was a section of wall that didn't match the rest. While the surrounding walls were covered in rich cream wallpaper with a subtle floral pattern, this section was bare plaster, painted white but clearly older than the surrounding decoration. "It looks like there might be something behind here," Marcus murmured, running his hands along the edges of the different wall section. "This plaster is definitely newer than the rest, but still old enough to have been here for years." Hayes frowned. "You think someone knew about this and moved the bookcase to access whatever's back there?" Before Marcus could answer, his fingers found what felt like a small indentation in the plaster, about shoulder height. As he pressed gently, there was a soft clicking sound, and a section of the wall swung inward like a door. Both officers stepped back instinctively, hands moving toward their radios. The opening revealed a narrow passage that seemed to extend into darkness beyond their flashlight beams. "Jesus," Hayes breathed. "How long has this been here?" Marcus shone his torch into the passage. The walls were stone, much older than the house itself. and the air that drifted out carried a musty smell, mixed with something else, something that reminded him uncomfortably of old churches and forgotten graves. "We need to call this in," Hayes said, reaching for her radio. "Wait," Marcus held up a hand. "Look at this first." On the floor just inside the secret passage, partially hidden by shadows, lay a modern object that definitely didn't belong in an ancient stone corridor. It was a small digital camera, the expensive kind used by professional photographers or serious hobbyists. Marcus carefully photographed the camera's position before picking it up with his gloved hands. The device was still warm, as if it had been recently used. When he pressed the power button, the screen flickered to life, showing that it contained over 200 photographs. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "whatever's in that camera, it's what our intruder was after." Marcus scrolled through the first few images, and his face went pale. The photographs showed documents, letters, and other papers that were clearly not meant for public viewing. Even in the dim light of the camera's small screen, he could make out royal letterheads and what appeared to be highly personal correspondence. "We have a problem," Marcus said, his voice grim. "Someone has been systematically photographing private royal documents, and based on the timestamps, they've been doing it for weeks." The implications hit them both at the same time. This wasn't a simple break-in. Someone with access to Clarence House, someone trusted enough to come and go without triggering security protocols, had been conducting what amounted to espionage against the royal family. "We need to secure this immediately," Marcus said, pocketing the camera. "And we need to find out how many people knew about this secret passage." As if in response to his words, they heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, measured steps that definitely belonged to someone much larger than the diminutive cleaning staff. Hayes moved to the doorway and peered out. "Sir, there's someone coming. A man. Looks like security, but I don't recognize him." Marcus quickly closed the hidden door, and they moved the bookcase back into its original position as best they could. The footsteps were getting closer, accompanied now by the soft murmur of voices. "Act natural," Marcus whispered. "We're just investigating a routine security concern." The door to the study opened, and a tall man in an expensive suit entered, followed by a woman Marcus recognized as Mrs. Thompson, Queen Camilla's personal secretary. The man had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that took in every detail of the room immediately. "Officers," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. "I'm Robert Ashford, Chief of Household Security. I understand there's been some sort of incident?" Marcus studied Ashford's face, noting the way the man's eyes lingered on the bookcase they had just repositioned. "Yes, sir. We're investigating reports of unusual activity in this room. Nothing conclusive so far." Mrs. Thompson, a nervous woman in her 50s with graying hair, pulled back in a tight bun, wrung her hands anxiously. "I do hope nothing valuable has been disturbed. Her Majesty keeps some very important personal items in this study." "What sort of personal items?" Hayes asked innocently. Mrs. Thompson glanced at Ashford before answering. "Letters, photographs, family documents. Nothing that would interest a common thief, I'm sure." Ashford stepped closer to the bookcase, and Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The man was definitely studying the wall behind it, though he was trying to appear casual about it. "Has this bookcase always been in this position?" Marcus asked, watching Ashford's reaction carefully. "Oh yes," Mrs. Thompson said quickly. "Her Majesty is very particular about the arrangement of her furniture. Nothing is ever moved without her express permission." But, as she spoke, Marcus noticed Ashford's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The man knew something, and he was clearly uncomfortable with the line of questioning. "Well," Ashford said after a moment, "I'm sure you gentlemen will conduct a thorough investigation. If you need anything further, please don't hesitate to contact my office." As Ashford turned to leave, Marcus noticed something that made his detective instincts flare. The man's expensive suit jacket was dusty along one shoulder and sleeve, the kind of dust that might come from crawling through a narrow stone passage. After Ashford and Mrs. Thompson left, Hayes looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. "Think he knows about the passage?" "I think he knows a lot more than he's letting on," Marcus replied grimly. and I think we just walked into something much bigger than a simple break-in. The camera in Marcus's pocket seemed to weigh a ton as he considered their next move. Whatever secrets lay hidden in those photographs, someone had been willing to risk their position, their freedom, and possibly their life to obtain them. The question now was whether that someone was the photographer who had left the camera behind, or the person who had hired them to do the job. As they prepared to leave the study, Marcus took one last look around the elegant room. Everything appeared normal on the surface, just as it had when they arrived. But beneath that normalcy lay secrets that someone was desperate to keep hidden, and others were equally desperate to expose. The game, as they say, was afoot. And Marcus Wellington had the uncomfortable feeling that he and Hayes were about to become unwilling players in a very dangerous match. Royal Guard Story, Part 2. The secure conference room at New Scotland Yard had never felt more claustrophobic to Marcus Wellington. 3 hours had passed since he and Hayes had left Clarence House, and the contents of the digital camera sat spread across the polished table like pieces of an explosive puzzle. Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Mitchell, a woman whose 30-year career had seen everything from terrorist plots to royal scandals, studied the photographs with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient texts. Her silver-rimmed glasses caught the harsh fluorescent light as she moved from one printed image to another. "This is unprecedented," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the full implications of what they were seeing. "These aren't just personal letters. Some of these documents appear to be classified government communications." Marcus leaned forward, pointing to a particular photograph that had caught his attention during their initial review. "This one here shows correspondence between Queen Camilla and what appears to be a private investigation firm. The letterhead reads, Meridian Research Group, and the date is just 6 weeks ago." Hayes, who had been unusually quiet since returning from Clarence House, spoke up from her position near the window. "Sir, I ran a check on that company. Meridian Research Group officially provides corporate intelligence and risk assessment services. Unofficially, they're known for handling very delicate situations for high-profile clients." The implications hung in the air like smoke. DCI Mitchell removed her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. "What kind of delicate situations?" "Background checks on potential employees, investigating threats against public figures, and—" Hayes hesitated, digging up information that clients prefer to keep private. Marcus picked up another photograph, this one showing what appeared to be a financial document. "This shows a payment authorization for £47,000, dated 3 weeks after the initial contact with Meridian Research. The payment code references something called Project Blackbird." DCI Mitchell stood and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room, picking up a marker. "Let's piece this together. Someone with access to Queen Camilla's private study has been photographing her personal correspondence. Among those documents are communications with a private investigation firm and authorization for a substantial payment for something called Project Blackbird." She wrote the key points on the board as she spoke. "The question is, was the photographer working for Queen Camilla, documenting her own communications for some reason? Or was this industrial espionage by someone seeking to expose or blackmail her?" Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming text message. As he read it, his expression darkened. "That was my contact at the communications security establishment. They've been monitoring unusual digital activity around royal residences for the past month. They detected several unauthorized transmissions from the Clarence House area, always late at night, always encrypted. Someone's been sending information out," Hayes realized. The photographer wasn't just taking pictures for personal use. They were transmitting them somewhere. DCI Mitchell added this to her notes on the whiteboard. "Timeline is crucial here. If these transmissions correlate with the dates when the photographs were taken, we're looking at real-time intelligence gathering." A knock on the conference room door interrupted their discussion. A young constable entered, carrying a thick manila folder. "Ma'am, you requested background checks on all household staff at Clarence House. Also, we've got the analysis back on that digital camera." Marcus accepted the technical report while DCI Mitchell took the personnel files. The room fell silent as both senior officers absorbed the new information. "The camera's interesting," Marcus said after a moment. It's been modified with extended memory storage and enhanced zoom capabilities. Professional-grade modifications, definitely not something you'd buy off the shelf. More importantly, the serial number has been filed off, but our tech team managed to recover it using acid treatment. He turned to the second page of the report. The camera was purchased 18 months ago by a company called Sterling Media Services. That company was dissolved 6 months later, but the registered address matches a property owned by... Marcus paused, checking the name twice to be sure. Robert Ashford. The silence in the room was deafening. Hayes was the first to speak. The head of household security at Clarence House owns the camera that someone used to photograph Queen Camilla's private documents. DCI Mitchell looked up from the personnel files. It gets worse. According to these background checks, Robert Ashford has some interesting connections. His brother-in-law is James Meridian, founder and CEO of Meridian Research Group. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Marcus stood and began pacing, a habit he'd developed during his detective years when processing complex cases. So we have the head of security at Clarence House, whose camera was used to photograph private royal documents and whose relative runs the investigation firm that Queen Camilla hired for Project Blackbird. But that raises another question, Hayes interjected. If Ashford was working with Meridian Research and Queen Camilla hired them, was this photography authorized? Maybe she asked them to document her own files for security purposes. DCI Mitchell shook her head. Look at this photograph again. She held up one of the clearest images, showing a letter with Queen Camilla's personal seal. This is a private communication to her sister, discussing family medical issues. No legitimate security operation would require photographing personal family correspondence. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face his colleagues. There's something else we need to consider. When we encountered Ashford at Clarence House, he knew about that secret passage. He was studying the wall, checking to see if we'd discovered it, but he didn't seem surprised that someone had been in that room. You think he was covering for someone, Hayes said. Maybe cleaning up after an operation that went wrong. DCI Mitchell added more notes to the whiteboard, creating a web of connections between the various players. Let's assume for a moment that this was an authorized operation. Queen Camilla hires Meridian Research for Project Blackbird. Ashford, as head of security, facilitates access to her private study. But something goes wrong. Maybe the photographer gets careless. Maybe they're discovered, and they have to abandon the camera. But then, why didn't Ashford just remove the camera himself? Marcus asked. He had access to the room. He could have retrieved it without anyone noticing. Hayes moved to the window, looking out at the London streets below. Unless he wasn't supposed to be there that night. Unless the photographer was working without his knowledge. The room fell silent again as they considered this possibility. Finally, DCI Mitchell spoke. We need to find out exactly what Project Blackbird is. And we need to determine whether Queen Camilla is aware of what's been happening in her private study. Marcus picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. I'll contact Meridian Research directly. If this is a legitimate operation, they'll have proper documentation and authorization. If it's not, he left the sentence hanging. And I'll dig deeper into Ashford's background, Hayes added. Financial records, phone logs, travel history. If he's been operating outside official channels, there'll be traces. DCI Mitchell nodded approvingly. Good, but we need to be extremely careful about how we proceed. If this investigation leaks to the press before we understand what's really happening, it could cause a constitutional crisis. As the team prepared to leave, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. Detective Sergeant Wellington, this is James Meridian from Meridian Research Group. I believe you have something that belongs to my company. I'd very much like to arrange a meeting to discuss this matter privately. Marcus gestured frantically to DCI Mitchell and Hayes, both of whom moved closer to listen. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Mr. Meridian. I think you are. The camera, detective. The camera that was found in a location where it shouldn't have been. I can explain everything, but not over the phone. There are sensitive matters involved that affect national security. DCI Mitchell grabbed a notepad and scribbled a quick message. Keep him talking. National security? Marcus said. I'm going to need more than that before I agree to any meeting. There was a pause on the line, and when Meridian spoke again, his tone was more urgent. Detective, Project Blackbird was authorized at the highest levels of government. What you've stumbled onto is a legitimate intelligence operation designed to protect the royal family from a very real threat. But if this investigation continues through normal channels, it will compromise an ongoing operation and potentially put lives at risk. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of threat? The kind that requires absolute discretion and immediate action. Meet me tonight at the Savoy Hotel, room 412 at 9 o'clock. Come alone and bring the camera and all copies of the photographs. I'll explain everything then. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He looked at his colleagues, both of whom wore expressions of deep concern. Well, DCI Mitchell said grimly, it looks like we're about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Hayes checked her service weapon automatically, a gesture that wasn't lost on Marcus. Sir, this feels like we're walking into something way above our pay grade. Marcus nodded, but his detective instincts were telling him they were getting close to the truth. Maybe, but we've gone too far to back down now. Whatever's really happening here, those photographs are the key to understanding it. As they gathered their materials and prepared to leave Scotland Yard, none of them noticed the figure watching from the building across the street, or the telephoto lens that had been tracking their movements for the past hour. The game was indeed afoot, and the players were finally beginning to reveal themselves. But in the world of royal secrets and government intelligence, the line between protector and threat was often thinner than anyone realized. Royal Guard Story, Part 3. The Savoy. Hotel's ornate lobby buzzed with the quiet elegance of old money and older secrets. Marcus Wellington sat in a leather armchair near the Thames foyer, nursing a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. His eyes continuously scanned the room, noting exits, potential threats, and the sophisticated surveillance equipment that DCI Mitchell had insisted be placed throughout the hotel earlier that afternoon. At exactly 9 o'clock, a man in an expensive charcoal suit approached Marcus's table. James Meridian was younger than Marcus had expected, perhaps 45, with the kind of polished appearance that spoke of elite schools and exclusive clubs. His handshake was firm, confident, but Marcus noticed a slight tremor in the man's fingers that suggested he wasn't as calm as he appeared. Detective Wellington, thank you for agreeing to meet. Shall we go upstairs where we can speak privately? Marcus stood, feeling the weight of the digital camera in his jacket pocket. Lead the way, Mr. Meridian. The elevator ride to the 4th floor passed in tense silence. Room 412 turned out to be a luxurious suite with panoramic views of the Thames. Meridian gestured for Marcus to take a seat in one of the sitting area's plush chairs before pouring himself a generous measure of single malt whiskey from the bar. You look like you could use one of these, Meridian said, offering Marcus a glass. I'm on duty. Thanks. Now, you mentioned national security and a threat to the royal family. I'm listening. Meridian took a long sip of his whiskey before settling into the chair across from Marcus. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Project Blackbird wasn't created to spy on Queen Camilla. It was created to protect her. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Protect her from what? From someone within her own household who's been selling information to foreign intelligence services. Meridian's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We've been tracking a leak for 8 months. Personal details about royal schedules, private medical information, even intelligence briefings that Queen Camilla receives in her capacity as consort. Someone with intimate access has been systematically betraying the trust of the royal family. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. And you suspect someone in the household staff? We know it's someone with regular access to her private study. The leaks correspond perfectly with times when certain staff members were on duty. Meridian reached into his briefcase and produced a thick folder. These are copies of communications intercepts, financial records, and surveillance reports that our investigation has uncovered. Marcus accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. Where does Robert Ashford fit into this? Meridian's expression darkened. That's where our operation went wrong. Ashford was supposed to be helping us identify the source of the leaks. He arranged access to the study and provided security clearances for our photographer, But 3 weeks ago, we started to suspect that Ashford himself might be compromised. Compromised how? Financial irregularities. Payments into offshore accounts that don't match his legitimate income. Phone calls to numbers we've identified as belonging to foreign intelligence assets. Meridian finished his whiskey in one swallow. We began photographing Queen Camilla's documents not just to trace the leak, but to provide evidence that could be used in Ashford's prosecution. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place, but the picture they formed was even more disturbing than he'd imagined. So, the camera we found belongs to one of our operatives, David Chen. He's a former MI6 photographer who specializes in document reproduction. Chen was supposed to complete his assignment that night and deliver the camera to a safe house. But something went wrong. He never made the pickup, and we haven't been able to contact him since. The implication sent a chill through Marcus's body. You think Ashford discovered Chen in the study? Meridian nodded grimly. We think Chen walked into a trap. Ashford may have been using his position as head of security to monitor our investigation. If he realized we were closing in on him, the sentence hung in the air, unfinished but understood. Marcus opened the folder and began scanning the documents inside. Bank statements showed regular deposits into accounts registered to shell companies in the Caribbean. Phone records revealed dozens of calls to numbers in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran. Most damning were transcripts of recorded conversations where Ashford discussed selling special access products to unnamed buyers. This is extensive evidence, Marcus said. Why haven't you taken this to MI5 or Special Branch? Because Ashford isn't working alone. Meridian's voice carried a note of exhaustion. Our investigation has uncovered evidence of a wider network operating within the royal household. We believe at least 3 other individuals are involved, including someone in Queen Camilla's immediate circle. Marcus looked up sharply. Mrs. Thompson? Among others. That's why we needed to document everything carefully before making any arrests. If we move too quickly, other members of the network could destroy evidence or flee the country. The hotel room fell silent, except for the distant sound of traffic on the embankment below. Marcus studied Meridian's face, looking for any sign of deception. His detective instincts told him the man was telling the truth, but the scope of what he was describing seemed almost too large to believe. "What do you need from me?" Marcus asked finally. The camera contains the last photographs Chen took before he disappeared. They may include evidence that could expose the entire network. We need those images to complete our case. Marcus reached into his jacket and placed the digital camera on the coffee table between them. Before I turn this over, I need verification that this operation is legitimate. I want to speak to your government liaison. Meridian smiled for the first time since their meeting began. I was hoping you'd ask for that. It shows you're taking this seriously. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Yes, sir, he's here. Yes, we've explained the situation. He'd like verification. Meridian handed the phone to Marcus. The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative, and unmistakably that of someone accustomed to command. Detective Wellington, this is Deputy Director Richardson, Joint Intelligence Committee. I can confirm that Project Blackbird is a legitimate counterintelligence operation authorized by the Prime Minister's office and conducted with the full knowledge and consent of His Majesty the King. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Sir, what about David Chen? Do we know what happened to him? There was a pause before Richardson answered. Mr. Chen's body was discovered this afternoon in the Thames near Wapping. Preliminary examination suggests he was murdered approximately 3 days ago, which corresponds with when he was supposed to complete his final assignment. The news hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. What had started as a routine security investigation had become a murder case with national security implications. Detective, Richardson continued, I need to impress upon you the absolute necessity of discretion in this matter. The success of our operation and the safety of the royal family depend on containing this investigation within the proper channels. I understand, sir. Mr. Meridian will brief you on the next phase of the operation. Your cooperation has been noted and will be remembered. The line went dead, and Marcus handed the phone back to Meridian, who was already reaching for the digital camera. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we use Chen's final photographs to build an airtight case against the entire network. Within 48 hours, we'll have enough evidence to arrest Ashford and his co-conspirators, but we need to act carefully to ensure they don't realize we're onto them. Meridian connected the camera to a laptop and began downloading the images. As he worked, Marcus watched the man's face grow increasingly grave. What is it? Chen managed to photograph something extraordinary before he was killed. Meridian turned the laptop screen toward Marcus. Look at this. The image showed a handwritten document in Queen Camilla's distinctive script. It was a letter addressed to someone called M, discussing concerns about the American situation and referencing our friends in Moscow who have been so helpful in the past. Marcus felt his world tilt on its axis. Are you saying that Queen Camilla herself is involved in this espionage ring? Meridian's face was pale as he scrolled through more images. It's worse than that. These letters suggest that the royal family has been in communication with foreign intelligence services for years, not as victims of espionage but as willing participants. The revelation was so shocking that Marcus struggled to process it. Everything he thought he knew about the case had just been turned upside down. But if that's true, Marcus said slowly, then Project Blackbird wasn't about protecting the royal family from foreign spies. It was about gathering evidence of their collaboration with those spies, Meridian finished. The British government has suspected for months that someone in the royal household was passing sensitive information to foreign powers. We just never imagined it might be Queen Camilla herself. Marcus stared at the laptop screen, where image after image revealed a web of international communication that stretched back years. Personal letters, financial arrangements, and what appeared to be intelligence briefings, all bearing Queen Camilla's signature or seal. What do we do with this information? Meridian closed the laptop carefully. That decision is above both our pay grades, but I suspect that when the dust settles, there are going to be some very significant changes in the royal household. As Marcus prepared to leave the hotel suite, he realized that he had walked into something far larger and more dangerous than a simple break-in. The secrets hidden behind that bookcase at Clarence House had revealed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of British society. The game was far from over. In fact, Marcus suspected it was just beginning, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of the British monarchy itself. Outside the Savoy, London's ancient streets held their secrets close, as they had for 1,000 years. But some secrets, Marcus now knew, were too explosive to remain hidden forever. The question was whether the truth would destroy those it exposed, or whether it would ultimately serve the greater good of the nation. Time, as always, would tell. But for Detective Sergeant Marcus Wellington, the simple days of investigating routine crimes seemed very far away indeed.